Please be seated. This gospel is packed. It's not long, but Mark is so concise in his language that there are 4 things that happen in this little pericope. It's kind of a seminary term, pericope. Don't you like that word? So we have first, they are leaving the synagogue. Remember last week they were in the synagogue and Jesus cast out the demons from the man who was possessed. And then it says after that they went to Simon's house and Jesus heals his mother-in-law. And then he welcomes all of the sick from the whole village that come, and he cures them and casts out more demons. And then he goes and he prays. He needs to find some alone time or some away time, recharge, and he prays, which is a significant thing to notice how often Jesus does that. And then he talks about what they're going to do next. So it's all packed in there. I'm mostly going to focus on this part about Simon's mother-in-law. So let me tell you a gratuitous mother-in-law joke. This is, Dan told me and said I could use it. So I'm giving credit where credit is due. So this man took his family to Israel on a big vacation. It was kind of the trip of a lifetime. And they had a great time until, sadly, his mother-in-law died while they were there. And so they went to the funeral home and said, well, you can take her body back to the United States for burial. That'll be about $1,000. Or we could just bury her right here. It would only be $100. So the man said, well, gosh, I need to think about that. So he thought long and hard, and finally came back and he said, take her home. And the guy said, are you sure? That's a lot of money. And the guy said, well, it's like this. I heard about this other guy who died in Israel, and he was buried here, and in 3 days, he came back to life, and I just can't take that chance. So the other thing about this is that it's almost easy to think of this story as a caricature. When you look at it, you notice that they get there after the synagogue, and they're probably hungry, and oh no, the woman who's supposed to make their meal is lying down, she's not available, we better cure her quick so we can get something to eat, right? So I think there's more to it than that when you look at it and when you think about it. So let me tell you next about my parents, because they were ultimate hosts. They knew hospitality. And I'm not talking about dinner parties, although they did that very well too. Usually the kids ate first and were banished to the upstairs when they had their dinner parties. But they invited all kinds of people over to our house all the time. I grew up in a big family. There were 7 of us kids. And so if you already are cooking for 9, if there was a couple extra people, it's not a big deal, right? You just put a couple more plates on the table. We had a long table that could be made longer with leaves if you needed. And instead of having dining room chairs, we had chairs on the end. And then we had these long benches. We called them deacon's benches. They had backs and sides, and we'd all pile in. And if you had to, it's kind of like church pews. You can always squish somebody else in if you need to. And then we would sit down, and this was just the routine. We'd all, when we were ready to, everybody was in, we'd go on 3. 1, 2, 3. We'd pull the bench up to the table, and guests would kind of laugh. That was funny, and I didn't know it was funny. I just thought that was how everybody lived. But there were, over the years, certain college students who would happen to drop by for dinner once a week or more. There were people at church, when we went to church, if there was somebody who was going through some difficulty, somebody who was going through a divorce, or a newcomer, somebody that just showed up, or somebody who was lonely, they would say, come on over for dinner. And there was a while there that every Sunday afternoon we had dinner for at least 15 people. And that was just what we did. And, all of us kids pitched in and helped. And my mother was an amazing cook. And there was even a little while in there when I was kind of teaching myself to play the piano that I would sit down and start playing hymns. And then one of my sisters would come and sing. And before you know it, we were all singing hymns. And people were shouting out numbers. And I never realized it was actually a thing until there was a college student named Mary. And we invited her for dinner after church. And she said, well, I'd love to come, but I have a big exam tomorrow, and I don't think I can stay for the hymn sing. So apparently it was a thing. I just admire so much what they did, that they did this radical hospitality, this radical welcome. And it made a huge difference to a lot of people to be able to be with a family, for a college student that was missing their own family maybe, or whatever it was, whoever it was. There were always people. There was a man named Mr. Veen who used to frequent the gift shop that my sister Sarah worked at downtown in Holland. And he would come in, and he was lonely, and he would talk to her. And she found out that he was planning to have Thanksgiving dinner at the Warm Friend Motel. She said, come on over to our house. And Mr. Veen came to our house for many years. And we were all in on the hospitality because Mr. Veen loved to talk. He loved to tell stories, and he was almost impossible to understand. He spoke kind of half English and half Dutch. We grew up in Holland, Michigan. And so we would kind of take turns, listening. And then somebody would say, I think Charlie's been in with Mr. Veen for a while. Why don't you go in and relieve him? And we'd kind of take shifts. So to me, this is a hugely important piece of a faithful life, is hospitality like that. And COVID has really interrupted it. But it is important. And who we are as a church community, it is critical to what we do. The radical welcome is so important. And it not just in this room and to people who come here, though I hope that we are doing that well. And it's not just our coffee hours, although they are amazing. It is how we are with each other and how we are out in the world. All the things we bring for Neighborhood House and our outreach and our ways of taking care of our neighbors and our neighbors across the world with our Water Well Fund, all of the things that we do to include, to notice, to extend God's love in this world. That's all called upon. And so when Peter's mother-in-law, by the way, he was married. I guess he was, but you don't really think about that, do you? I guess if you have a mother-in-law, you're married. Here she is with a fever. And, in our eyes, we just think, okay, take a couple Tylenol, call me in the morning, right? They didn't have that. It was a very different situation. We have to remember to put ourselves back in that time and read in that context. And a fever could have been she was on her deathbed. A fever could have been very, very dangerous. There wasn't an easy way to cure it, and often it was a sign of an infection, and they didn't have an antibiotic to prescribe, right? A fever was a dangerous, dangerous thing. It wasn't like she held the thermometer up to the light bulb because she wanted to get out of cooking dinner. Right, she was sick. And when it says Jesus took her by the hand and raised her, it's the same Greek word that's used when Jesus was raised. And thank goodness, came back to life. So there's that piece. And then there's the piece of her being able to do her vocation. That was her way of being. Her job, her livelihood, in a way, was to be the host, to provide that kind of hospitality. And for her not to be able to do that was crippling. So for her to get up, and yes, she served them. That's what she immediately did. But that's what I think that was her job. That's what she wanted to be able to do. Now we all need to break from time to time maybe, but I think it is important to know that what she did was what she she was called to do, and she was able to because she was healed. It's also important to notice that Jesus didn't just expect other people to serve Jesus, right? Jesus too was a servant. Jesus talked about, I have come among you as one who serves. And he's out there healing the sick. He's working. He's humble. He's not demanding to be treated like royalty. He too is practicing that radical hospitality, like we all do. We all must, really. So I think that, the jokes aside, it's not to be belittled. Her illness was serious. Her cure, her healing was miraculous, and her being able to do her job was a very, very good thing for everybody. So Teresa of Avila, I know I've said this before, Teresa of Avila said that Christ has no body on earth at this time except for ours. Ours are the hands with which he feeds the world, takes care of the world. Ours are the feet that take us where he needs to go. Ours are the lips that speak the words that need to be spoken. So it is not a small thing to be able to do that which we are called to do. May it be so. Amen.
Amen.